Had the soybean day in Wahoo. Dave Goeller is our guest, the Deputy Director of the North Central Risk Management Education Center. We're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about beginning farmers, retiring farmers. What's the current demographics or age on most of Nebraska's farmers?
Well, the largest group is the 35 to 64 group, and the group that's been increasing is the over 65 group, and the group that's been decreasing is the under 35 group.
Do you expect to see that changing at all? I know there's some thought that maybe with high commodity prices that'll bring some people back to the farm.
I'm hopeful that we'll see some increase in the under 35 group. You know, we're in the 3,000 range across the whole state of operators that are in that age group, which is just not very many operators. And you know, at the commodity prices and the opportunities that are there, there's been a lot of interest in that group, and I'm hopeful that will show up in our 2012 Ag Census that's coming out here now shortly.
Because of that, it's probably important to talk about farm succession and passing it on. How important is it to have a plan? And I know you talked about today when to bring someone else in if you're thinking about that.
Well, without a plan, you know, I think what does happen is the assets from the business are going to pass to the next generation. Frankly, all you have to do is die and those assets are going to transfer. But if you want to have a business that's ongoing and viable and have a successor so that business turns out to be a legacy and something that goes on into the future, it's my opinion that you really need to have a plan for that, and you need to think about the various factors of transferring management, transferring those assets, whether or not retirement's going to occur. All those kinds of things need to be considered.
You mentioned before we started, one of the tough things for a lot of farmers, they're making decisions. These are people who make decisions every day, and you have to pass that on. What's your advice to someone who's thinking about doing that?
Well, you know, the skills that it takes to be successful now, you need to be decisive, you need to be a driver, you need to be aggressive, you need to be out there pushing your business. And I think that those skills, or that individual that has those skills, a lot of times it's difficult now to set back and say, well, now I'm going to turn into a coach, or I'm going to turn into a mentor or a teacher. I'm going to teach my son or my successor or the neighbor or the daughter or whoever it happens to be that's going to come in and help take over this business. I'm going to now teach them that management skill. I think that's a difficult thing. It's a hard thing for our identity, especially as men. A lot of our personal identity is associated with being successful and being out there and doing those things. So I think it's a really tough thing to do.
One of the eye-opening stats I saw was, and it's somewhere around half, maybe more, Nebraska farmers don't have wills. What's the repercussion of that?
Well, the repercussion is and I would look at a will as a plan, of course, and without any plan, the repercussion is that, you know, we all know someday that those assets are going to change hands because we're all mortal and someone's going to die. And so when that occurs, if you don't have a plan, then the state of Nebraska tells you what will happen with those assets, and it likely is not going to be exactly the way you would like it to happen. So,
with those retiring farmers, they have a choice between, you know, keeping some of their assets, maybe cash renting some of their land, and completely selling it off, putting it somewhere else, using the money to travel, whatever it might be. How do you advise farmers to weigh those two options?
Well, the thing I always look at is, you know, what are you going to put your money in? You know, I think traditionally what we would see is a situation where a farmer might sell his land and maybe move to Phoenix or whatever he might do, but there's going to be cash, and if the alternative is going to be put it in a CD at 1 or 1.5% interest, you know, that's probably not a very handsome return. Cash rents now are probably significantly better than that for most operations. So you know, I really think that it depends on what the alternative is, but you know, if it's just simply putting it in a CD, I don't think it's hard to beat that right now.
I'll close with the beginning farmer tax incentive. How can that help both farmers and landlords who are going to rent land out to a beginning farmer?
You know, we have a program in Nebraska called the Beginning Farmer Tax Credit, and it's for owners of agricultural assets that are willing to rent those assets to beginning farmers. And it's for a 3-year lease, and the owner of those assets can be a relative. You can lease it to your son or daughter or neighbor or whomever it might be. And the owner of those assets gets a 10% in tax credit for a cash rent and a 15% tax credit for a share rent. And the beginner is qualified by having farmed for less than 10 years and having a net worth of under $200,000. So it's a great tool, especially when we're trying to maybe put a little more cash flow into the operation to help account for those years when there's going to be a father and a son, maybe both needing to pull some income out of it. It's a great tool. We were the first state in the United States to do it. There are others that have followed, but I'm real proud that we have that available, and it's a great tool for people. It's Department of Agriculture does all of the administering of that program, and so you can just Google the Nebraska Department of Agriculture or the Nebraska Beginning Farmer Tax Credit and get all the information right there.